It started with a knock on my cabin door. I opened it expecting a neighbor. Instead, I found a woman with a clipboard, sunglasses too big for her face, and a scowl sharp enough to cut wood. "I'm from the HOA," she said. But here's the thing. My cabin isn't even in an HOA. That should have been the end of it. But 3 days later, she came back with a locksmith. By the time I got home, she had changed the locks, hung curtains, and was drinking wine on my porch like she owned the place. Spoiler alert, she didn't. But the FBI would soon be the ones to tell her that. You see, this cabin has been in my family for 43 years. My grandfather built it himself, timber by timber, nail by nail. It sits on 12 acres of peaceful forest. No streetlights, no sidewalks, no board meetings, definitely no HOA. But Eleanor wasn't just any Karen. She was the queen of the Valley Pines HOA, an association from the gated community nearly a mile away. Somehow, she believed that gave her jurisdiction over my land. When I told her to leave my property the first time, she literally said, "Then maybe you shouldn't have built your cabin inside our community boundaries." What? At first I thought this was just your standard entitlement, but then things started to escalate, fast. I began receiving letters, official-looking ones, telling me I owed $3,800 in community improvement fees. Then came the fines. Then came the notices. Then came the threats. All of it from an HOA I never agreed to, never signed with, and that legally had no authority here. I laughed, at first, until I came home one weekend to find a giant red sticker on my cabin door. "This property is under HOA review. Do not enter." I tore it down, furious. But 3 days later, I returned with my girlfriend after a camping trip, and the locks had been changed, not vandalized, not broken, professionally replaced. And sitting on the porch swing with a smug grin and a glass of Merlot was Eleanor. She had moved in. "I'm only occupying what technically belongs to the HOA now," she said. She even had a deed. Except, it was fake. Printed, forged, notarized in a different state. This woman had faked the ownership of my cabin. And the sheriff? He shrugged, said it was a civil matter. That's when I knew. I couldn't play fair anymore. I had to out-Karen the Karen. So I stopped fighting. I acted like I accepted it. I asked for visitation rights to grab my things. She agreed, too confident, too entitled to realize I had a plan. Because every time I went in, I took photos of her inside, of her mail, of her laptop, open on the kitchen table, showing emails, HOA records, private info. One photo caught something big. In one of the photos, I spotted a folder on her desktop labeled Rezone Docs, Confidential. That was enough to start pulling the thread. I reached out to a friend from college who works in real estate law. She ran the documents through a public records search. And guess what? Eleanor had been forging zoning records to try and expand the HOA's boundaries, illegally. She wasn't just stealing my cabin, she was committing real estate fraud on a massive scale. And that's when we called the FBI. The FBI agent we spoke to was skeptical at first, until we showed him the notarized deed she claimed was real. It had a fake notary seal, one that had been used in 3 other cases currently under investigation. Turns out Eleanor wasn't just a bossy HOA president. She had a side hustle, illegally acquiring property and flipping it for cash, using forged documents to trick retirees into donating their land to her Green Space Initiative. And my cabin? She was trying to list it on Airbnb at $600 a night. The next move was chess. 2 weeks later, Eleanor was in my cabin again, hosting a wine night for some of her HOA board members. She had no idea that 2 of her guests were undercover agents. At precisely 9:42 p.m., the lights cut out. Moments later, black SUVs pulled up the dirt road. Flashlights, jackets with yellow letters. FBI. They entered with a warrant, handcuffed Eleanor mid-toast, and led her out barefoot in her silk robe. I stood at the bottom of the driveway, and for the first time in 3 months, I smiled. The cabin was returned to me within the week, but that wasn't the end. The HOA board? Dismantled. Turns out 3 members had quietly signed approvals for Eleanor's fake acquisitions. Fraud, forgery, interstate racketeering. They're still facing charges. And Eleanor? She's been charged with 5 counts of property fraud, 2 counts of document forgery, 1 count of impersonating a government official, and obstruction of justice. She's currently awaiting trial, but rumor has it the plea deal isn't pretty.